Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy, the Social Security Disability Edition. Let's talk about the 5-step sequential evaluation test. And when people call my office, I tell them the first thing we're going to talk about, first thing I want them to understand is this 5-step sequential evaluation, because that's the framework of our proof. So the first question is, are you working? And if so, are you earning more than the applicable SGA monthly amount? What is SGA? Significant gainful activity is a money limit that is basically a cutoff. And currently right now, it's about $1,550 per month. I tell my clients it's that if they're working and they're earning more than that, it doesn't matter how disabled you are, you're just not eligible for benefits based on those earnings. If you're working and you can work, I like to have my clients keep their earnings consistent with their medical conditions and limitations so that they're earning something less than $1,550. Why? Because the first question Social Security is going to ask is, well, why couldn't you work more hours and earn more than that $1,550? So we want to keep it under that number. Now, that SGA number changes every year. And there are ways that we also can argue potentially that some of the work may not necessarily be SGA. And I'll talk about that in later episodes. The next question they ask is your medical condition severe? In other words, are we dealing with a condition that has lasted or will last a year or will result in your death, and one that is permanent in nature? In other words, it's not temporary. The next question they ask is step 3 is, does your medical impairment or impairments meet or equal a Social Security listing? Now, the Social Security Administration has a big book. It's called The Listing of Impairments, and it's based on anatomic systems. You remember high school biology. You learn about the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, all the other body systems. So Social Security has this big book called the Blue Book, or the Listing of Impairments, and you can open it up to the applicable section based on your disabling medical condition. And what you're going to see is a laundry list, literally a laundry list of findings that Social Security wants to see in your medical records. It's very difficult to meet a listing because doctors didn't take a class in medical school to learn how to write a report for Social Security purposes that ticks off all of the elements. Now, there are some conditions that just based on their severity alone are going to meet a listing. I gave you an example in an earlier segment about a physician who had an amputation. An amputation is potentially one of the listed conditions. Cancers potentially can be listed conditions. Back conditions can be listed conditions. But again, it all comes down to having the right documentation in your medical records. I would say to you that at least 90% of people do not meet a listing. Now, if you do meet a listing, your benefits are automatically awarded based on the severity of the impairment, and you don't have to go on to steps 4 and 5. But as I've said, at least 90% of cases go on to steps 4 and 5. This is where the rubber meets the mat. At step 4, the issue is, can you go back to the lightest and simplest demanding job you held in the 5 years before you became disabled? Now, that's becoming sort of a term of art because of some recent emergency changes to the Social Security rules. It basically used to be 15 years before you stopped working, but now it seems to be 5 years from the time an adjudication or decision is made on your claim. And what happens is that a lot of jobs fall off. And practically speaking, I'm seeing in the new application of this rule that a lot of people's relevant work, which can be helpful. We go on to step 5. And the step 5 is this crazy cockamamie, not real world test. And that is there other work in the mythical, hypothetical, not real world national economy that you could hypothetically do, even though it doesn't pay a living wage and you have no interest in it, and it may not necessarily exist in your area in significant numbers in view of your age, education, skills, and your restrictions and limitations. So you can understand that this is a crazy cockamamie, not real world test. And that may explain in part why people you see walking down the street who don't look like they're disabled, in fact, are disabled under the terms of this 5-step sequential evaluation. Now, let's quickly talk about the claims process. And I'm going to use some legal words here. It's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass because, unfortunately, the Social Security claims process is behind. And right now, depending on where you live, it can take as long as 1 year from the time your application is filed until they assign a claims examiner. Wow. Now, 2/3 of the claims are denied, and you do have 60 days in which to file an appeal. And I'll explain some of the things that we do to improve our win rate. But you need to understand that, as I said, at least 2/3 of these claims are denied. If you don't timely file an appeal by filing a request for reconsideration, then you have to start all over again. Now, in most states, that process of appeal is called a request for reconsideration. And as a Social Security lawyer, I'm really hoping at some point they get rid of this because, in my view, it just adds a deadline delay. The request for reconsideration goes back to Disability Determination Services. They assign a new claims examiner, and unfortunately, 2/3 of the time, claims get denied again. And this process, at least in the Tampa Bay area, is taking about another 8 months. Don't hold me to it because this is like a moving target. If your claim gets denied, you have to file an appeal called a request for a hearing. And you get out of DDS and then you get into the Office of Disability Adjudications and Reviews where the judges are housed. Now, I know that people get discouraged because of denials. You're disabled, you're having financial problems, you can't understand why Social Security isn't paying the benefits because your doctor said you were disabled, your employer said go home, we can't work with you. But you got to hang in there. You got to be a bulldog about this. You to give up because at the hearing stage, you have the opportunity to present medical evidence, testify about your medical conditions and limitations, and explain to the judge why you meet the 5-step sequential evaluation. And again, these are things that I tell my prospective clients right out of the box. We talk about the 5-step sequential evaluation. We talk about the claims process because the strategy for winning the case starts, in my view, before you file that application. And if you come to us at the denial stage or the hearing stage, we will still explain this 5-step sequential evaluation process to you and talk about the strategy and things we want to do to implement to try to get your benefits, and certainly to try to get your benefits if we have to go to the hearing. So let's do a quick review. How does the 5-step sequential evaluation impact the determination of entitlement? So think about this in a step process, if this, then that. If you are gainfully employed, earning more than SGA, are you entitled to benefits? No, because you exceed that earnings amount. So the question becomes, have a severe impairment. And if you don't have a severe impairment, then you're not disabled. Do you have an impairment that will last at least 12 months and result in death? If the answer is no, you're not disabled. Does the impairment meet or equal the severity as defined in the medical listings? If the answer is yes, you're disabled. If the answer is no, you don't meet a listing, the question is, can you do your past relevant work? And if the answer is yes, you're not disabled. If you are able to do, if you're unable to do your past relevant work, the question becomes, well, can you do other work? And if the answer is yes, you're not disabled. If the answer is no, you're disabled. So you can see that this is not a common sense definition of disability, but you need to understand this so that we're very clear about what needs to be proven and the kind of evidence that needs to be provided to win your case. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. If you enjoy this episode, like our page, leave a review, share it with your family or friends, and subscribe to this podcast. Please tune in to next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy.
Struggling with your Social Security disability case? The right attorney can make all the difference. Get our booklet, The Key to Hiring a Great Attorney for Your Social Security Disability Case. Discover how to find an experienced attorney who will fight for your rights and navigate the process with ease. Don't leave your future to chance. Request your free copy at caveylaw.com today and ensure you have the expert support you deserve.